Hello, everyone. I recently put out a community post thanking everyone for their support for the past year since I started this channel about a year ago. I think it was like December 15th when I put out my first video on this thing. Generally, I wanted to start this video mainly as an informational video for some of my patients so that I could kind of give them information that I repeat to a lot of people so I wouldn't have to repeat it all the time. I could just send them to my YouTube page and they could watch the information on their own time. But then, COVID became the dominant health story. So, most of the videos on this channel are about COVID. And I'll probably just cover it because I'm interested in it myself. There's a lot of questions I have about COVID and things like that. So, for me, I'm interested in it and I want to know about it. So I research it and then make a video so that you guys can know about it. Anyways, I asked what kind of questions you guys were interested in. And so I thought we'd have kind of a different video today and I'd kind of go over the questions and kind of briefly answer them. And if some of them seem more interesting, we may make a full video about them. Okay, so I'm unfortunately probably going to butcher a lot of you guys' names, so I apologize in advance for that. So Tariq, a lot of you guys said some very nice words, and I really appreciate it. Tariq was interested in a lot of lifestyle stuff, diabetes, insulin resistance, obesity, weight loss, nutrition, that kind of stuff. And that's something I'm very interested in. Interested in lifestyle medicine, so there will be in the future lots of videos on that kind of stuff. And I think it's a very important thing to go over the actual data behind a lot of lifestyle interventions. And there's a lot to be done. And then future uses of mRNA technology. That's an excellent suggestion. As many of you may know, BioNTech and Moderna were actually developed as cancer vaccine companies. They were not, they weren't interested in COVID or viral vaccines. That was not even on the radar when these companies were made. They were looking at mRNA as a cancer therapeutic, and that is still what they're going to be using it for. And so there's a lot of potential for this mRNA technology as a cancer vaccine, and I think we'll talk about that because I'm a cancer surgeon, so that's something of a lot of interest to me. All right, so Uthman's congratulations on graduating medical school, and he had a question about viral mutation, or she had a question about viral mutation. I can't tell from the name. So I think you're talking about this lab leak theory, and I actually made a video about it. Did COVID-19 escape from a lab? There was a lot of talk about gain of function mutations and whether or not COVID, escaped from the Wuhan Viral Institute. So if you have questions about that, you can watch that video. I'll link it below in the descriptions. But overall, I think that we probably have to do viral mutation research. It's very hard to learn anything about anything without kind of manipulating it. Just observational studies can only give you so much, and by doing mutational research on viruses, you can figure out like what part of each viral genome is important for. Now, of course, if the viral mutation research is done indiscriminately and not ethically, it can be dangerous. Someone can engineer a super virus. That's probably possible. And with the rise of like CRISPR-Cas9 and other things, there is a lot of potential for badness. And so it needs to be done with good oversight and with good safety protections. But I think probably the benefits outweigh the risks of viral mutation research as long as it's done correctly. The difficulty here is that biotechnology has increased to the point with these technologies such as CRISPR that make mutational research not only on viruses but even on humans very easy to do. And what used to take a large team of researchers years to do, someone can probably do it out of a well-equipped garage in a few months. And so it's hard to control this stuff because the barrier to entry is so low now. So I suspect, and I'll probably make a video on this because I think it's a very interesting topic, is I suspect that there are people doing germline mutational research on human embryos right now. I bet they're doing it. We just don't know about it. Someone, someplace is doing research on manipulating the human genome in a germline thing. And I would not be completely surprised to find out that China or Russia or some country or someone somewhere or some like rich billionaire is funding secretly research on making basically superhumans by manipulating the genome. It's very easy to do. It's theoretically not that difficult. There's just been some ethical concerns, so people aren't doing it openly. But yeah. So anyway, viral mutation research. I think it's going to happen. Just needs to be done carefully. Andrea, you know, made a lot of good comments about diet and exercise and how we all struggle with that. And it's true. I mean, everyone struggles with diet and exercise and living healthy. And it's not usually a function of not knowing what to do. It's usually a function of like motivation and doing the things we know we need to do. And so there's a lot of research on behavioral modification. That's really not my area of expertise, so I don't think I'm the best person to make videos about that. But that is a very, very important point. Sebastian had a lot of good questions. So he was wondering if we could make a follow-up video on the spike protein and nucleus. If I see any follow-up research, I will definitely make a video on it, but I suspect that is kind of getting lost in the ether with Omicron coming up, and I don't think people are going to do repeat of this study, just like I have that video about science's dirty little secret. A lot of scientific research is not repeated. And then in layman's terms, does the spike protein from the vaccine versus actual COVID spike protein act the same inside the body? Really not known, but we do know that the two proteins are different. The spike protein in the vaccine is modified to have two prolines in the middle of it. And the reason for that is to stabilize it in the pre-fusion conformation. So here, this is an article I found back from September of 2020. This is not a scientific article, but basically it talks about how even before COVID was even existing in the world, there were some people that Graham and a former postdoc, Jason McLean, had devised a solution to this problem before the pandemic. They had been looking at MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, and they found out, so the way that the spike protein works is it binds the ACE2, and then once it binds, it undergoes like a shape, it's like shape shifting. It hinges, and then that allows the virus to fuse with the a cell so that it can enter the cell. So what we need the antibodies to do is we need the antibodies to recognize the protein before it hinges, before it's fused to the ACE, because you want to bind it before it binds the ACE, right? So they figured out that this hinge is floppy, and so they didn't want it identifying the hinged protein. They wanted the unfused protein. And so they realized that if you put two prolines, the prolines are, if you look at the side chain of the amino acid, it has a bulky side chain, and it's very stiff. So that makes it not hinge very well. So they added two prolines to it. So it is a modified spike protein. The vaccine is a modified spike protein. It's different than the spike protein that's in the virus. Now, does that make it more dangerous or less dangerous? We don't know. Probably not. It's probably not more dangerous. It's less functional. And then do we find out if their spike proteins are very harmful to us in the long term? I think this is kind of doubtful because coronaviruses all have the spike protein, and coronaviruses have been around as long as human beings have been around. So we've been living with coronaviruses for, a long time. And it may be bad, but it's not that bad because we're still here and they're still here. I would expect if spike proteins did something really bad to us, the people that it does really bad things for have probably been selected out of our population because coronaviruses have been around. If 3 doses of the COVID shot made for the original COVID and not tweaked for new variants really helps it, or if it does not, because mutations will be able to bypass them. Okay, so I think the question here is asking, why are extra booster shots helpful? That kind of has to do with the way the vaccines work. The vaccines work by generating what we call a polyclonal antibody response. So the the antibodies that you generate through a vaccine or through natural immunity, they recognize many parts of the spike protein. So if you look at, let's see, let's look at, this is a picture of the spike protein. So here's the spike protein, and there's a receptor binding domain here. So here's the part that binds the ACE inhibitor. If the antibodies there'll be like several different antibodies that recognize different parts of this. Like, one will stick here, one will stick here, one will stick here, here. And if you have a variant, some of these mutational spots, like the Omicron variant, has a lot of the receptor binding sites and neutralizing antibody binding sites modified. So then, let's say that there were like 20 different antibodies that attack the receptor binding domain attached to it. And now with the Omicron, half of them don't stick, or more than half of them don't stick. So now you only have like 3 or 4 of them that stick. Because those are the ones that haven't been mutated yet. Well, if you boost them, you'll get more of those too. It won't be as good because you won't have all like 20 of them binding, but at least the 3 or 4 that are binding, you'll boost more of those. So you will get better neutralizing antibodies with more boosters. Now, if they make a quote Omicron specific one, then your body will be presented with that mutated protein, and it'll have more recognition sites. So theoretically superior. All right. Mixing vaccines. Okay, so mixing vaccines, I made a video about that called Mix and Max Vaccines Better. If you don't want to watch the video, yes, matching vaccines probably better. And it's probably better because your body gets a kind of slightly different look at the spike protein and can recognize new areas to bind and to make antibodies for. So, and it's a little bit different way. The presentation to the immune system is probably slightly different with a adenoviral vector versus an mRNA vector. And so for various reasons, there's data to suggest that mixing vaccines gives you better immunity. And also that's why there's another video on here called super immunity. And if you have natural immunity, if you've been exposed to the actual virus plus a vaccine, that's also better. Would be great if you made a video about the health effects of electronic cigarettes from Dennis. Yeah, that's a very important thing. I work in head and neck cancer, so smoking is a big reason that people get head and neck cancer. And there was thoughts that electronic cigarettes were better, and in many ways they are better, but they have their own set of problems. So yes, probably will make a video about that. Why are ICUs designed to let people? Why aren't ICUs designed to let people sleep without constant interruptions, noises? We know how important sleep is to healing. Yeah, very good question. It's a complicated answer, and I don't know if there's enough interest in this to make a whole video about it, but there's definitely enough information to make a whole video about it. There's a lot of factors. One, ICUs, you have to monitor patients, so you have to take vitals every hour or two, and that necessitates waking up the patient, unfortunately, because you have to take vitals every hour or two. And then some like neuro ICUs, they have to do neuro checks. You have to shine lights in people's eyes and pinch on them to see if they elicit a response and stuff. So it's not ideal, but there's probably ways to make it better, but some of it is innate to how ICUs work, that they have to be that way. I mean, I think nurses try to turn down the alarms and the noises and stuff as much as possible. But basically, once you're in an ICU, you are high acuity of care. There just needs to be a lot of stuff done. I mean, no one's really comfortable in the ICU. People are on high flow oxygen. They have NG tubes in there. They got lines, central lines, probably a urinary catheter, maybe a rectal tube. It's not a restful environment, and it kind of can't be almost. There's a lot of things in healthcare that we do that don't make sense if you just kind of look at it superficially. But if you understand how the system works, it kind of it's hard to figure out a different way to do it. For example, we know that lots of sunlight and good airflow is good for patients, but we keep people inside with filtered air and things like that, because that's how you can control it. The hospitals are liable for things that happen to patients. They want to be able to control things. If you just open the windows and do all kinds of stuff, that lets the outside environment in, and that's a not controlled thing. So Hospitals just want to control the whole situation as much as possible because they're liable for what happens inside their hospital. So I think that that's a lot of the reasons that things are the way they are. How worried should we be about all the microplastics in our food and water? These cause endocrine derangements in people, and it is probably a problem, but it's kind of unavoidable in our world. We've unfortunately polluted our environment so much with microplastics and stuff. I don't think you can avoid it. Like, there's very few places on Earth you can go to that you can avoid this thing. So it's bad. I don't think it's that bad. And more importantly, like, what can we as an individual do about it? Not a lot. You can't avoid it. Like, do I support policies to reduce plastic use? Yes, I personally do, because I think it's a problem. But you personally, I can't avoid microplastics. I think it's better to focus on the things that we can do something about, like diet, exercise, and things like that. Like, we can individually control that kind of stuff. Microplastics, can't avoid them, unfortunately. Jesse Swan had a lot of questions about compassionate use paperwork. I'm not too familiar with that. And then how to get Sotrovimab and AstraZeneca monoclonal antibodies. These have been, okay, so that's interesting because I made a video about this. I called it, "This One Is Actually Promising," VR 7831, back in March of 2021. This is the VR technology in GlaxoSmithKline monoclonal antibody that is now called Sotrovimab. And then AstraZeneca has a thing called Evusheld. This is their monoclonal antibody, and both of these have been. Both companies have reported that they have some activity retained against Omicron. So both of these are meant for early treatment, pre-hospital treatment, and then actually Evusheld is a prophylactic treatment. This is mainly to give people that are immunocompromised. So it's not for treatment; it's for prophylaxis. They are doing some studies to see if it's good for early treatment and for hospital treatment. But this is not available for you unless you have immunocompromised state and you're at high risk for getting exposed to it. This one, Sotrovimab, that one is for early treatment, and you can get it. And if you're a physician and you want to get it, what you need to do is just reach out to your AstraZeneca or GlaxoSmithKline rep, and they can tell you how to get it. Now, people can't be using this all the time because, like, so many people are exposed to it. If you gave this to everyone that was exposed to it, you'd run out of antibodies really fast. So it's meant for people that are high risk, so people with diabetes, elderly, immunocompromised people, that kind of thing. So if you're a relatively healthy younger person, probably shouldn't be using this stuff. And then lastly, Holden Robbins had a question about ADE. I did make a video about what is ADE. This was back in January of 2021, so almost a year ago at this point. And nothing has really changed that much. And I don't think that ADE is a big problem because now we have given billions of doses of this vaccine, and billions of people have been infected and are getting secondary infections from COVID. So if ADE was an issue, or at least was a major issue in COVID, it's not impossible that in a few people it may be an issue, but if it was a major issue, you would see people that are vaccinated having more severe disease. That's not the case. Vaccinated people definitely have less severe disease, and then you would see people that are getting reinfected, so they had previous COVID and they're now reinfected with COVID, like Omicron. You would see them having more severe disease with the second infection if ADE was an issue, and you don't see that either. People that have natural immunity have less severe disease, and as the early data from South Africa comes out, 80% of certain regions of South Africa had the Delta virus. Delta variant, and now they're being reinfected with Omicron, and Omicron is not more severe. So ADE does not seem to be a major issue. If you want to know what is ADE, why were we worried about it, that kind of stuff, please go watch this video. Most of the information, all the information there is still good. So there's that. well, I hope this was interesting to some people, and if more questions come in on this, I will maybe make a quick video and address those too. Thanks for watching.